Welcome to another Thursday with Third Path webinar. As usual, I am so excited for today's webinar. We have developed the most amazing community of parents and leaders who are really thinking outside the box. And today you're going to meet a couple of them, and I think you're going to leave inspired around why we can really think in new ways around work and family, and why remote work really creates a great opportunity for us as we think ahead about our goals around work and family. I'm going to talk a little today about some really important topics. And when you hear these ideas, you'll see it's leading up to a pretty exciting event. We have a parents forum in the middle of February. And we're hoping that when you hear some of these ideas today, you'll see the Parents Forum is a great place for you to start learning about how to do work and family differently. So let me show you a couple things around why this is possible. I want to start by talking a little bit about how families change over time. And I want to share a little bit about my story, but you're going to hear some other stories too. You know, we start at this point in time when we're balancing work and family, when we don't even get very much sleep. And I can remember this like it happened yesterday. But my children are now 25 and 31. So kids do grow up. And then we get to something I refer to as the golden years, where kids are in school and happy and pretty able to, do things independently, and they are actually more able to do things like play on their own and stuff like that and follow your suggestions. It's quite a lovely time. During those times, though, we still need to think about summer care and sick days and all kinds of things like that. But I remember those years fondly as well because it was fun to actually hang out with my kids after school, and Jeff actually was in charge of our kids a couple other days of the week after school. Along comes the teen years. And I think that what new parents don't know, or even parents of young school-age kids, is that the work we've done as parents to stay really connected to our kids early on pays off in a big way when we hit the teen years. It's pretty hard to be a parent and suddenly swoop in and try to have very personal conversations with our teens if we haven't made a track record of doing that all along. And that, over the years, what Jeff and I really learned is to work together as a team. You're going to hear a lot more about that as we do our call today and why remote work made all this more possible. Like I said, we've got a pretty amazing event planned for February 17th and February 24th. They're 2 half-day events so that you can kind of balance work and family around participation. And we really would love to see you there. You'll learn lots more about this and see some of these parents you're introduced to today at the event. In fact, one of the people we're going to be hearing about is Roger. He's someone we met a long time ago, and I'm going to have him talk a little about how his work and family solution changed over time and how remote work was an important part of it. In fact, all of our pioneering leaders that I've talked about on our different Thursday webinars have used remote work as a very important part of their success story. Just for example, Michelle, she's the person who worked a flex year schedule, almost turning off work for 2 months in the summer. Well, one of the ways she could do that is because it was easy for her to work remotely. And so people could connect with her if they had a question while she was off for those 2 months. Mostly she didn't work. She worked about 20 hours over the course of a month that she knew that she was going to have to work. The rest of the time, she could handle it all remotely during those 20 hours. All of our parents really have used remote work to make their work-family stories work. You're also going to hear from Tricia. I have this picture up about Tricia because if you go to the Atlantic and you type in the title of this, How Parents Can Teach Kids About Gender Roles, you'll see a wonderful video that her husband, Whit Honey, is narrating. And he talks about how he and Tricia have really been role modeling something very different for their 2 boys around how men and women can both be actively involved in family, and that she's the one who does a lot of home repairs. So make sure to check out that wonderful video, but you're going to hear from Tricia today and how remote work has been an evolving part of her story around balancing work and family. You're also going to hear from Brian Anderson. I saved him for the end because one of the big messages today is remote work is critical for, I believe, work-family balance, especially for getting men to be actively involved in the care of their children. And Brian is a great example of that personally, but he's also really working hard to make that something that all people can be doing in their lives. And Roger, it's so good to have you. I was thinking about you when I was talking about how families change over time, and you're a great example of that. You have started out early on sharing in the care of your kids, and I know that remote work was an important part of it when the kids were little. Now they're a little bit older in those golden years, school-age years, and you've continued to use remote work during that time, and you made it through the pandemic. So maybe start with the earliest parts. What did it look like when you first were caring for your children, and how did just briefly more about the remote work part, how did you guys make it work using remote work?
Well, thank you, Jessica. It's really great to be here. So early on, when we first started the remote work, or first started with this shared care journey for us, it was when my son was born about 12 years ago. And at the time, it became pretty obvious to us that my wife, Shmuel, we didn't want her staying home full time. So what other options were out there? And it came to us, our work had some policies in place where we could both work flexible schedules, and we both were at the same company. And so that's what we did. We signed up for, I think at the time, she was at about 50%, and I think I was more at 60 or 70 to start, but it would change. But the way it was really set up was so that each of us were in the office a couple days a week and at home a couple days of the week, so that we had coverage throughout the week. And somebody was always at home with the kids, and somebody would be at work. And I mean, early on, just honestly, the days in the office were the easy days. Those were the days you could wake up, you had time to yourself. Even if it's doing work stuff, you could schedule your day. The home days, they were a challenge sometimes, but it was so worth it. I mean, those early bonding times, I always was joking. It's like, I want the kids to feel comfortable to come to me as well if they skin their knee. And, it just turned out amazing.
Yeah, well, that's a great example of the value of men using remote work and being present during those early years. I remember our kids used to call us mom, dad. They didn't actually call us mom or dad. They had this mom, dad name because they kind of equally saw us as, like you said, the person that could comfort them when something was hard, or help them when they had a question or needed something. That's a great example. Now, I agree that sometimes that day when you're trying to balance work and family, even if you are not the parent in charge, the other parent's in charge, it can be a little bit more complicated when you're making it all work from home. But think ahead about as the kids got a little older, a little bit more independent. Maybe now you've got your youngest is 5 and your older one's a couple years older. They're off to school every day, and you're still continuing that remote work day. What did it look like then? Again, pre-pandemic, when you were kind of in that school years, but also having some remote work days.
Sure. Certainly as the kids got older, it just became easier and easier and more fun. Instead of being in the constant nap, sleep, change diapers cycle and feeding and, just keep it going through that cycle. It became we can go out for play dates during the day. You can get out to the parks. You can go for a run with the kid in the stroller, or you can meet up with people, or, even taking them to swim lessons or grocery store in the middle of the week when it's nice and empty. Like all that stuff. It was really great. And it just provided just some time to do some of that stuff that otherwise would have been pretty overwhelming. Trying to do that on top of working full schedules and picking your kids up and dropping them off from daycare. Another just great benefit just from the entire time we've been doing this is we both truly knew, both me and my wife truly knew what the other person was going through. It wasn't, hey, why isn't certain things done at home? It was like, I understand what happens at home. I understand, if things are a challenge, or some days are challenging, some days are easier than others, like things pop up. It just all makes a lot more sense that way.
Yeah. No, that's a huge benefit is, again, Jeff and I really, and it doesn't stop there, Roger. I mean, it just keeps on going. So now Jeff and I are dealing with elder care. And again, because we've both flexed our schedules, we've worked remotely, we know all the tricks of the trade, we can keep on applying them at every life stage, and be real partners in figuring out how to accommodate both work and life to each other and understand each other about how to do that. Back to that great point about what it's like during those quote unquote golden years when our kids are kind of school age, but you've got, in your case, you've figured out how to have a little bit more time for family. You're working remotely a few days a week, so there's a little bit less commute time happening. I love that point about that you can go to the grocery store and there's less people. I also found that I really looked forward to having that break in the middle of the week. I happen to have my short days with the kids, so I could pick them up after school on Thursday and Friday. And I really found that by 3 o'clock on Thursday, my brain was kind of fried. And having that change of routine from work to playing with kids, it was good for my workplace too. I really came back more refreshed because I had some fun doing different things with the kids at the park or whatever. Does that sound familiar to you, that there was just this kind of nice back and forth between work thinking and family fun? What about you?
Yeah, it definitely sounds familiar. And it's just a time it's a change of pace. Like your brain's just not completely thinking about work, or it's in that work mode and the stress of that. And you kind of turn that off for a little bit and go do something else. I mean, and not to say that it's not using your brain to be with the kids, but it's just a different part of it. And it's relaxing in a different way. And, and as the kids are getting older as well, things we could start to do, because we were working either remote or flexing our schedules or working less hours, was being there, to pick up the kids from school if they needed to, or volunteering with different activities. Like, this fall, I was working with my son's robotics team to volunteer and oversee some of the work that they were doing in the wood shop there. And so it was just really cool to be able to be there and see some of that. My wife, she's volunteered over the years for different events as well, Destination Imagination and some other things. And it's definitely nice to be able to do that aspect of it.
The last question before we go on to a couple more points I want to make and put the slides up, then along comes the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I'm not pretending it wasn't easy for you guys. It wasn't easy for anybody. But do you think it's possible, because you and Shimel had both had experience with remote work, both had experience with thinking outside the box around how much work you could handle, did that help a little bit as you got hit by the pandemic and all of its repercussions like everybody else?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, don't get me wrong. The pandemic life it's been tough. There's a lot of life changes for sure, but we had felt like we'd been training for it for 10 years. We had it down. I mean, as far as, a lot of people were going into the pandemic, like, how do you do this remote work thing? But we'd been doing it for so long, and we're just experts at it, that it was, that transition from a work standpoint was fairly easy. And I mean, lots of bad came out of the pandemic, but one of the things that was great that came out of it was it really forced a lot of companies to rethink what the workplace needs to look like, or what people, where they should be working from or have to be working from. Ours, when we finally do go back full time in the office, I mean, there is no full time back in the office. I think they say something like 3% of the workers actually are saying they want to do that. The vast majority are, hey, we're going to be part-time in the office and part-time remote. They call it the hybrid work schedule. And that's going to be continuing what most people want to do. It's only go in the office if there's a real reason to be there. If that's, hey, we got to collaborate in person, once a week or once every couple of weeks, then fine. you're coming in just to show your face, not so much of a great reason. Zoom or WebEx it's good for that. And so, I mean, that's a really huge positive, is finally figured out that this is viable.
It took a pandemic for us to wake up and learn these things, that you literally were doing hybrid since your first child was born. So really wonderful example. Thank you so much. So before we started the webinar, we went ahead and started thinking about, well, what are some really big benefits of remote work for family well-being? And the one I've been talking about with Roger is the idea that at every stage of parenting, there really are different benefits. We didn't talk much about teenagers yet. His kids aren't teenagers. In brief, with teenagers, the idea that you can kind of be physically present and available to them when they want to start talking to you about whatever's going on. Actually, I think Tricia can talk a little bit about that. Obviously, it helps us navigate planned and unplanned changes, shift work in small increments if we need to, greater geographic flexibility. Actually, that's something a lot of people are now experimenting with, maybe not moving to a place where they're closer to their family of support or have more outdoor space. And for single parents, all of this is doubly important. When we get to Brian, we're going to talk a lot about how this is really important for dads to become equal partners in sharing care. And that in general, we've seen a lot of evidence, and we're going to put an article out next week that talks about this, that when parents can share responsibility, they're also happier. So we really see remote work as this incredible opportunity for family well-being. And the beauty that you hear over and over today is that it's something you keep on building on and learning from, getting better at. And that this is the slide we showed all pandemic long, because really to get through the pandemic, we had a number of families in the Third Path community who knew they really had to be a team at home, and that they needed to think about this as a together solution. How can we work together around our work and family goals? How can we address the unique needs of our family? Create that common schedule that we're getting through the week with, that makes the best fit of what both of us are working on and the time our family needs. And getting our kids involved. There's a million ways as your kids get older that can help out with cleaning and cooking. And I know some families that got their kids involved with ironing and all kinds of stuff. Kids want to be part of the family solution. And most importantly, what we learned through the pandemic and have learned from all of our Third Path families is that you really need to kind of build in some recharge time for yourself and your family. All right. Want to learn more about some of these ideas? We, again, are excited about what's coming up around the corner, our parents forum. And so to get you started, we made something available even today. It's our Work Family Options Workbook. And you can go to our website, you can search free Third Path resources, and you can download this today and start learning about how you can put some of these ideas that Roger was talking about into action. In fact, you'll see Roger and Jim's story in the Work Family Options Workbook. I'm going to start with Tricia, because she's got a story that I think a lot of people are going to relate to. She actually was a newcomer to remote work, one could argue, but Whit, her partner, has been doing remote work since their son, 15 years ago, was born. And so they certainly are a family who knows about the opportunities of remote work, but I'm going to let Tricia tell the story about how she switched to remote work, no surprise, because of the pandemic, and what the reasons were. And Tricia, when you tell that story, I think what's fun about your story is how, even though what you're doing today is so different than what you did before, there were many transferable skills. And so I think that's important for people to hear, because they too can follow the Tricia path and do something radically different and find that remote job if they're interested. So Tricia, tell us a little bit about what you were doing before the pandemic, how it's evolved to what you're doing today, and what were some of those transferable skills?
Okay, so hi, nice to be here. I was working at a restaurant managing. So I would sometimes get home at, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, or leave at, 6 o'clock in the morning to be there at 7. And So my schedule was a little crazy and I wasn't home all the time. And if I was home, I was sleeping because I was tired. And I did that. I used to have a corporate job, like a 9 to 5. And then I went back to management to get another job type of a thing, follow a path. And then I had just gone back to the corporate office working, like 8 to 4. And I worked there from like February. And then we went remote in March, like March 19th or something like that. So I was only there for like a month and a half. And then I worked remote for them from middle of March to like the end of May. And then I got laid off. So once I got laid off, I found, just a part-time job in another restaurant, back end or kitchen, office, which was fine because it was really nice to work 4 days a week. And then a friend of mine was like, hey, do you want to do this other job? And it was project management, which is not something that I was necessarily was certified for or anything, but a lot of the skills that I had used in the restaurant or in management training were transferable as far as like managing people and projects and keeping things on track. So a lot of those skills, being organized and efficient, those all work well for me in this new job that I have, which I've been at for almost a year now.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I think that's important for people to hear is that, there's often parts of your job, no matter where you work, that are going to be really useful in a remote workplace. In fact, I think, Tricia, that the idea of kind of the relational skills are actually even more important in a remote workplace because you have to learn how to connect with people virtually. You can't rely on just bumping into them at the restaurant, patting them on the back. There's some informal stuff we can do when we're physically present with people, but you still want to build those strong relationships. And so I would think actually your skills of kind of connecting to people, making them feel happy and comfortable and dealing with problems at the restaurant, because I'm sure you did with that those all became extremely important and are things you're tapping every day in the work that you're doing. Does that sound right?
Yes, I was actually thinking of that earlier when you were speaking, but my communication skills were always pretty good in building rapport, but because everybody wants to be appreciated and things like that. And now I try to make sure that, when I'm talking to certain groups, I'm like yesterday I sent out a message, hey, that thing that you guys tell me when you're done, I love it. And like I get little hearts all the time from it. So it makes, reaching out and making sure I'm making the effort to, include, because, the please and thank you is always like, it's always implied, but it's always nice to put it in words just to make sure that they know that you appreciate them. And I feel that I have a lot of good relationships at this, at this job and at this company, and people reach out to me all the time. And I think that my communication skills, even though it doesn't sound like it right now, have greatly improved.
Oh, you're doing great. And on the flip side of this, here's your life that's changed from having to have these long hours on site. Again, work that you probably enjoyed, but now you're doing it remotely. Let's start with the benefits. What are you really enjoying for yourself, for your family to work remotely? What's working well?
So I pride myself on being super efficient. I have lots of free time. When you work smarter, not harder type of thing, you get a lot of stuff done in the time that you need to get it done, and you have a lot more free time. So I don't have to work. I work my 8 hours. I don't have to work 9 or 10 hours to get things done or to be present. So it's very nice. I have time to, if I'm feeling particularly stressed, I can go sit in the backyard for a few minutes and pet the dogs, or I can, one of our sons is he's on the volleyball team. And so I can go out and, hold the things. We can practice spiking or, it's nice to have that time that I don't have to be in the office because I have things done.
Yeah. Yeah. And all of those things that you're talking about, it's this double benefit. Yes, it's good for you personally to take that little break. Yes, it's good for your son to have that engagement in volleyball. What a lovely example of how remote work is working well. your workplace benefits too. And I wonder if this makes sense to you. You know, it's that, yes, at Thursday, my brain was fried and I stepped away and played with my kids, but I came back clearer headed and sometimes without intending to, when I was taking that break Thursday afternoons playing with my kids, some new fresh idea popped into my head around work. It's just how our brains work. Without intending to, our brains are still percolating around certain things. And when we do that, a new idea pops into our head without us trying to come up with a new idea. Has that happened to you, that you get these work ideas in the middle of, not that you're trying to, but they just pop up?
I'm a big fan of the Pomodoro method. You know, you think about something, you walk away and you come back and you're like, oh my gosh, and you're just building blocks of information and learning things. So I think that it always helps when I'm trying to figure out a problem or, you know, trying to resolve an issue between people or between departments. I can, you know, walk away and be like, oh, that's what I need to do. And it does help. It is really nice to, you know, have that time to actually think about your work instead of just working or being in meetings all the time.
Great. And then last but not least, and Brian, I'll probably ask you this question too. So think about it from your kids or from Whit, your partner's point of view. How has this changed your relationship with them? How has it helped? What are your kids seeing? What is it like for Whit for you to be home?
Well, I take up all the meeting space because I have the computer that I'm in meetings. We like made a little office and he always has to leave the room when I'm in meetings. So it's funny. He stands a lot. However, the boys, like, you know, Atticus is 18 and Zane is 15. And so almost 16. And like last summer, to make sure that they weren't on the computer all the time, it was like they would plan what we were going to have for dinner for the whole week because I was super tired of it. I was just like, oh my gosh, I can't think of any more food. So they would actually, okay, well, we want to have this. And then we would all cook it together for dinner. So that was really nice to be in the moment there. And they both know how to cook. They can bake now. So it's just been really nice to spend the time with them. And, you know, they've always been super affectionate. Like from when they were little, I had like a thing, like, this is what you have to do when you get up in the morning. And the first thing is to go like say good morning and hug mom and dad. And like, they still do it. So it's nice to have that time where, you know, I'm not up at 5 o'clock in the morning and not seeing them. You know, they still want to be around us, which is nice. And I don't know if you know, maybe in a conversation with you've heard this, but just being home and hearing Zane talk to his friends, because they talk so much, it's crazy, but he actually says really nice things about us as parents. Like, oh, my mom and dad do this. It's really cool that they do that. And it's like, you know.
Yeah.
Nice.
It makes a big difference. You guys have done something really wonderful. You've really created a lot of time where they've seen you in their lives. You've been a real partnership at home, so they've seen you both really think about family together. And I, like we were saying before, that makes a big difference in those teen years. Not that there aren't going to be some times when it's tough with teenagers because they're separating from us, and that's very normal. But it's also, you've really showed them something about their being important and being available. And that makes a huge difference in those teen years. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, maybe we'll save it for Brian to talk a little bit about how this has impacted our relationships at home with our partners too. Brian, we're so glad you're here. You too had a big change over the pandemic. Briefly, tell us a little bit about this wonderful organization that you're running, and I know you're doing it primarily remotely, and then we want to hear about how this is, you know, why this is important for the work you do, but also how this has played out as an important thing for your family life. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks for having me. So Fathering Together became an organization before COVID hit us, but we actually turned in all of our paperwork to become a 501c3 in February of 2020 with a whole master plan for what we would do. And obviously we know what happened shortly after that. And so we had to really focus and double down on virtual spaces and communities where dads can hold one another accountable and really explore in a safe and a vulnerable way what fatherhood is and the relationship we need to have with our children. And as I was doing this, I was also working full time. And this was my quote unquote side hobby. And very shortly, well, about a year into the pandemic, I found that I was pouring myself into my work rather than pouring myself into the family that I lived with and ultimately worked with in this point. And it was very much me versus them versus all of us versus the pandemic, or all of us versus whatever challenge we were facing. And as I've shared this in other spaces as well, one night I was putting my 7-year-old at the time to bed, and she was like, "Dad, you're doing all this work to help dads be better dads, but you're not being a good dad to me." And the fact that I had a relationship with her that she felt comfortable saying that does say something, but it didn't feel very good to hear those words. And, I said I was sorry. I gave her a kiss and ran out of the room before I started crying and, to take the knife out of my heart. But those words were not untrue, right? Like, she saw the stress I was under. She felt the impact of my stress in my lack of patience, my very transactional way I was dealing with my family rather than a relational way. And so thankfully I took that really painful moment and doubled down on my conviction to only work on fathering together. And thankfully, April of 2021, I was able to make that shift. And really, as we built Fathering Together, focused on that idea of we as fathers have an identity and a care for our family first and foremost. And how do we lead as an organization in that way? For me as a staff, for all of those that volunteer and work with us, so that we aren't, just recreating the wheel of pressure to do good work. And by the way, also be a dad. But instead, how are we good fathers? How are we leading with relationship to make social change so that we aren't just falling into the trap of I'm the breadwinner and that's about all I contribute to my family. But instead, how am I in emotional support? How am I investing in my emotions and the relationships? And thankfully, 10 months later, my daughters don't say I'm terrible. They love hanging out almost too much. Like we need, as you say, we need that alone time. And so much of what my wife and I try to do is really kind of separate, okay, this office space I'm in now is in our basement. And so when I'm not working, I'm not in this room as much as possible. And how do I kind of separate my work environment from my home so that I'm not constantly working or feeling a pull to come back in and just send that email really quickly or get that last thing done, but instead, okay, close my door and now be present again with my children and make that plan work for all of us.
What a great, you got right to the heart of the issue of how to make remote work better too, is this idea of creating some, whatever they are, boundaries, in your case, a physical boundary. So thinking of your workspace as I'm down in the office and I'm working and I'm doing family stuff and I'm not going down to the office, because it's really easy. That's the thing we hear from everybody. It's really easy when working remotely to have it spread into the work, to spread into our lives. The truth is, work spreads into your life, whether you're working on site or remotely. The truth is, work will always take up every minute available. And so whether you work at the office and are good at shutting things down and leaving, or working at home and good at separating things, it's a skill set we all need to learn, how to set boundaries at work. But I love your answer around creating a physical space. I too did that. It's funny, when my kids got older, I had to move it up to the 3rd floor because they could figure out how to get to the 2nd floor. And I've heard some parents say that they had to learn how to actually put a lock on the door because they really needed to have that physical barrier, whatever it is. It's the whole family understanding. Sometimes I'm working, now I'm not working, and getting everybody involved with that agenda. Wow. So how we're hearing that your kids are happier. Do you mind me asking, how's it for you and your partner? Is that working better for you guys around this? And what are some highlights that you can share around that too?
Yeah, many times it depends on the day in terms of the crises or what variant is impacting our life and the who needs to show up when. But I think what I've found, again, the mindset of it's us versus the problems rather than us competing for attention or for time. And we've implemented a few things. I always love to to mention Eve Rodsky's Fair Play, because it's a great method. It's not a perfect method. We've adapted it to make it work for us. And as our girls are getting older, we've started bringing them into that system of really identifying what are the things in our life that we need to manage, and to what extent can we manage those as a team versus individually. And each week just kind of checking in, like my wife, it's almost therapy for her to do laundry and the folding process. So she does that. The same thing for me with dishes. As much as I can't stand always being in the kitchen doing dishes, it's weird the therapy that comes out of just washing and putting them in an orderly way into the dishwasher. And so we've identified ways that we can contribute, but also kind of work on our mental health. And as our girls get older, what they can start to do in terms of clearing the table, wiping the table floors, tabletop floors, etc., so that they are also building their identity as an integral part of our family. But the other piece that my wife and I have made very clear is, when do we need that alone time, and how do we ensure that even if it's just going for a walk, that I take on, like, okay, I'm the dad for the night. My wife can do what she needs to do. And then tomorrow I get the night off to, go for a walk, just close myself off in the bedroom, read a book, so that, again, we're creating those spaces to be a human being and fill our own interests, as well as coming back and being a part of the family.
Yeah, all of it's important, right? Work is important. Couple time is important. Individual time is important. Family time is important. And so what I love is, us versus the problem. That sums it up. Whatever the problem is, okay, we need to share family chores. Us versus that problem. Okay, we both need some self-time. Us versus that problem. Okay, we haven't had a date night for a long time. How do we together make that happen? And I think that's what I see in the Third Path community and our shared care families. And what you're going to learn about at the Parents Forum is that we can really help you think this way. And then it's a lifetime benefit, because, like I said, yes, I've got older kids. Yes, they've left the nest. But there are still ways that Jeff and I think together about what do we want in our future, now that we're empty nesters. How are we going to help with elder care? Whatever it is, what's life is, are we going to phase into retirement one day? And what will that look like? And how can we afford that? And what interests do we want to pursue now to make that happen? So this is a life cycle of us versus whatever you're up against. And importantly, remote work plays such a great place in this, because what I heard in all of your stories, Brian, you gave a great example, is that, you can stop in the middle of the day and get some dishes done, fold some laundry, play volleyball. You can do these things that are part of family life that actually help you relax, get your brain back, think smarter at work. So I think remote work helps us with getting the tasks done on the family side, but also helps us stay fresh and thinking clearly on the work side. So where we're going to go next is start seeing if there's any questions from our audience. Sergio is going to read us those questions, and we'll see if we have some snappy answers for people who have some questions. Depending on how the questions go, we might also hear from a couple more people around their remote work solutions. As we're waiting for some questions, have you dealt with some of the challenges of remote work? I know what one of them was, setting boundaries and really being able to step away from work. When our work is in our own physical space, one of the challenges is, how to step away from it. Is there any other challenges that come to mind that are specifically around remote work that you've had to learn how to get smarter about? And Sergio, when you're ready, you can let us know that you've got a question for us too. Anybody, I mean, you've been doing it a long time, Roger. Any tricks you learned early on about, or challenges around remote work? Tricia, you're kind of newer to it. Anybody, challenges that you've dealt with and solutions you've come up with around remote work?
Yeah, I mean, certainly one of the ones you touched on was just setting those boundaries. And one of the things that I learned really early on, so yes, I can have my email with me all the time. I can have my IM with me all the time. No matter what I'm doing, I could respond. But as well with that, especially at that time, I was working a reduced schedule. So it was only a couple hours I needed to work on my home days at that time. And the decline button is an acceptable answer for meetings. There's a decline, there's a maybe. And I use all three of them depending on what's coming through. And, you just got to really make that decision consciously, thinking about, is this something I really need to be at, or is it not? Not every meeting you're invited to really needs to have everybody there. And it's also something that I make sure to tell my team at work as well, and really encourage them. So look at what the agenda is. If this applies to you, yes, be there. If it doesn't, don't spend your time on it. There's other stuff to do. Whether that's work related or it's home related. It's like, don't be hidden. Don't join a meeting just to join.
Yeah. We're actually going to be sending out in our next newsletter. If you aren't signed up for our newsletters, make sure you do, because we have a really great example of what Roger's talking about. There's a number of things we can do to set better boundaries around meetings, email. Work will take up every minute that we give it. And then we have a great blog coming out around some ideas about how you can kind of push back around that. Anybody else around remote work? I have one question for you guys. If you don't have one more thought, but if you have a thought, go ahead.
Yes, I was going to say it's been interesting. Remote work. I'm really good at being busy or whatever. But it's been really good to teach the boys as they get older that I'm like, oh hey, I'm in a meeting, or oh hey, this is what my schedule looks like. You know what I mean? Kind of like being able to bring them to my computer and say, this is my day. Maybe you could do those chores that you're supposed to do, right? To get them done so that they're on track. And, I'm like, I can't make dinner unless the kitchen's clean, or, and Whit's always good about that because he's been home forever, and me with my crazy schedule. And I can, when they come out and they're like, hey, what's for dinner? It's like, well, I'm still working. So maybe you want to start it. So it's been good, because when you're gone at the office all day, or you're away at work, they don't see you actually doing the things. And so it's been great for them to see us do the things, I think.
Yeah. And what you're doing, and I'm going to come back to you, Roger, after this, is you're pointing out, you're demonstrating to your kids how to use technology smartly as well. Our kids are growing up with technology being constantly in their face. And we need to learn and set boundaries, because then we're role modeling to our kids that they can set boundaries around technology too. And they can turn it off, go get the kitchen cleaned up, so you can all sit down and have dinner together. I don't know if your family does this, but we definitely have some technology-free zones, and dinner is one of them. It's really, we're helping role model some. The power of being able to work from home, the power of being able to turn off technology and get some other things done too. Roger, it sounded like you wanted to say one more thing too.
Yeah, no, some of the Tricia said just jogged my memory on something else we've been doing. I mean, it was really helpful during the pandemic, but at that point we had 2 people working remotely from home, and then 2 kids as well doing Zoom classes. All had their schedules, all had to be on different times. And so having a shared Google Calendar in which we put all that stuff in, and we could make some sense of our lives, and like who's doing what, who needs to be where, when, and when do we need to make lunch to get lunches to people at the right moments. It was all really nuts and tough at first, but it ended up working out okay once we got the swing of it.
Yeah, us versus the calendar. And you guys came up with a good way to make a common calendar that you could all see, and then as the kids get older, get their activities in there, getting their actions to help us in there too. Wonderful. There might be a question, Sergio, for us. If not, I have one more question for my group. This has been delightful. I love all your thoughts. They're really good ones. Sergio, any questions for us?
Yes, we have one. The question is, has anyone faced any challenges during the pandemic when one parent is working from home and the other one still in the office or outside of the home?
Tell us, what are some of those challenges, and how did you accommodate them? Brian, I saw you shaking your head.
Yeah, my wife is a physical therapist. So for a few months there, it was very up in the air, and she did a lot of the telehealth kind of things, but it's, you really need to be physically present for that kind of work. So our roles very much reversed as we lived into the pandemic, and me shifting into remote, because previously I had a long commute to get to my office, and And in those emergency moments, she was the go-to parent. And now I'm 2 blocks away from the elementary school. And so we've made a very concerted effort to make sure the school knows to contact me first and make sure that I'm the go-to parent for those kind of things. And really setting a plan. We also use Google Calendar. We use a number of other things just to make sure we know when Laura's in the office versus when not, and how the best way to contact her when we need her input on something so that she's not interrupting a client session or something like that. And so again, that went into our communication early on, and then some backtracking and figuring things out when we realized we forgot a step, because no one's perfect and can plan every crisis, but really making not just our internal house unit in line, but communicating that with the school, doctors, et cetera, to shift those emergency numbers around.
Yeah, wonderful example. There might be another one out there. I just thought of something that's connected to this too, but Roger, Tricia, any thoughts? None required?
I really didn't work. I mean, I worked for a very short time out of the house during, while Whit was doing remote work during the pandemic, and I brought COVID home. So that was kind of a challenge. So I never tested positive, but 2 of them did. So then I just became I was the maid. I brought food to the things, and it was very, everybody's trying to be busy and in school, and what are you going to do? So, that was trying to get work done and trying to take care of everybody else was a little bit of a challenge while they're all quarantining in the bedrooms. So other than that, I mean, I think that we have a good system down as far as, being at home. If I don't want to make dinner, I just sit on the couch and wait for Whit to make dinner, or vice versa. So we've been doing it so long, but we didn't really have a lot of challenges because of it, especially because the boys are older. And I think that was our saving grace, because,
Yeah. Well, you're making me think about one family where the father was expected to kind of go back on site. Definitely was an example of a job that could have been done remotely. And what it did was create havoc for the family, because the father kept on getting exposed to COVID and then having to quarantine. And then the mom was in charge of the kids all weekend while the father was quarantining. And ultimately, they got the courage together to say to their workplace, this is not working for the family. For the parent to suddenly have to quarantine means the other parent is doing too much work. And so this was going to go on for a while, because as we saw this fall and this late this year, that this is just continuing to be a problem. So the family kind of spoke up and said, hey, working remotely worked, and we're going to keep on doing it. Otherwise, it's really stressful on the family system. So that's just one other thought that came to my mind. I had another idea about this, though. The great question. Thank you, whoever asked that, because what I can see happen is if you've got one parent who's typically the remote parent and one parent who's typically the at-office parent, I can see a pattern sometimes where the remote parent becomes the one who is overtaxed with flexing for family responsibilities. Oh, this is happening. Oh, that is happening. So they're already home. So they're handling more of the family stuff. And I think that's just something parents need to be thoughtful about, to not overburden one parent because they happen to be home with all of the family responsibilities, but instead to come up with some other solution where maybe that parent's flexing around the plumber and the car repair and the school, whatever, but the other parent is maybe doing more of the shopping and the cooking or something, finding that solution that feels fair around family responsibilities. Great question. There might be one last question. The other 2 parents that we had lined up to talk today, you'll just have to meet them at the parents forum. But there might be one other question, Sergio, for our panelists today before we do our wrap up.
No more questions.
All right. Well, that was a great one. What I'm going to do is put up a couple of last slides. And as I put up those last slides, I'm going to get each one of you to share one last thought about why remote work has been such an important part of your solution to making work and family well-being happen. So I'm going to put up the last couple of slides, and then I'm going to get Roger, and then Tricia, and then Brian to share a last thought. Again, thanks everybody for your questions. They were really great. They got us thinking about some more stuff that we hadn't talked about. Next Thursday webinar is going to be a town hall webinar where we have a much more interactive event where you guys can participate and ask questions. And it's about the opportunity of using parental leave as a chance to really launch your integrated approach to work and family. And I wanted to ask each of our guests for one last thought. So Roger, any last thoughts about why remote work is helpful for family well-being? Tell us.
I mean, just it's allowed us to just be more present with the kids and with the family. And, you know, when they get home from school, I mean, used to be you go pick them up at the bus stop, and right now, you know, they're virtual for a couple of weeks, and then we'll be back to that. But it's great; you can instantly get a bit of an idea of how their day went, and I mean, just also the aspect of remote. It saves a lot of time. There's no more commuting to the office. Like, I've been to work physically 6 times in the last 2 years, and that's a lot of trips that are saved. And so, you know, it provides a little extra time in the morning, extra time to start making dinner in the evenings, frees up the evening to do more fun stuff with the family. I mean, it's just overall fantastic from that end. And done right, It doesn't mean that you're not connected at work either. There's plenty of ways to stay connected with work too. Yeah.
We certainly learned that this past year. And again, I think because you guys have been really careful about not having work take over your lives, you have the energy for the fun side of the family stuff that remote work allows you to benefit from. So thank you for that. That's great. Tricia, any last thoughts about how remote work is good for family well-being?
Well, for our family, I will say, I know that when I was working as a restaurant manager, I was busy and I was not present. And now at home, I know a lot of people have trouble, you know, putting away the work or shutting the laptop or whatever. And granted, I will answer messages on Teams, but I work less, which is nice. I work a lot less hours, a lot fewer hours. So I have more time to, you know, go lay on their bed while they're watching or while they're doing something on the computer, to be, you know, interested in what they want to do and what they want to be and what they want to see. So it's just been nice to kind of reconnect, to use this time to reconnect before they fly away, you know, because one's 18 and one's almost 16. So it's actually been kind of, it's been really nice to be here.
Yeah. I think a lot of people are feeling what you're talking about, that there is this, it's a window that is constantly closing, our chance to be with our kids. One parent pointed out to me, there's only 18 summers with our kids. And so you're really making the most of that opportunity before they do fly the nest, because it happens. They fly the nest. Brian, I wanted to save you for the end because, you know, as I reflect back on what Jeff and I did 31 years ago and what you are launching into and promoting dads to do, I really do think remote work is such a critical ingredient for dads to be actively involved in their parents from the start all the way through those 18 summers. What's your last thoughts about the benefits of family well-being and remote work? Tell us.
Yeah, so many research articles point to the positive influence dads have on their kids, from, you know, mental health to self-esteem, and that's just to be physically present, not engaged. And so remote work has given me an opportunity to really like have those deeper conversations that come up in the spur of the moment, where my kids just ask a harebrained question that if I didn't have any time, I'd just give a quick terse answer and move on. But instead, like the other day, we just created a book out of our imaginations by just coming up with funny plot lines. And that doesn't happen when I have to commute 2 hours out of my day. So I think, again, that just the gift of time in the family with our kids is so precious. And I'm seeing that as a silver lining out of this pandemic.
Yeah, absolutely. Wonderful. Hey, well, I told you guys this was going to be amazing. You guys did a fabulous job. You're inspiring. I know that there's a number of people who are listening in today who are inspired to try this out. Please come to our Parents Forum. You'll meet parents just like this, and we'll help you think about next steps to put these ideas into action. Thanks everybody for coming today. Really appreciate it.